You had always struggled with big, ambitious goals that never seemed to stick. Every year, you set a list of resolutions: losing weight, getting in shape, reading more books, or developing new skills. And every year, despite your enthusiasm, you found yourself back at square one after just a few weeks, defeated and frustrated. You felt like you were always chasing something just out of reach, unable to break the cycle of starting strong and then fading away. One day, in an attempt to break this frustrating cycle, you picked up a book titled Atomic Habits by James Clear. The book promised something different: a practical and science-backed approach to making small changes that would lead to big results. Intrigued by the idea that small habits could lead to profound change, you decided to give it a try. At first, you were skeptical. You had tried many times before to make drastic changes, only to burn out quickly. The idea of focusing on small, manageable habits instead of setting huge goals seemed almost too simple. Clear, however, presented a compelling case for why big goals might not be the best way to approach change. Goals, he argued, were about the results, whereas the real power lay in the systems, the daily habits and routines that lead to those results. You had always focused on the outcome: losing weight, reading more, or achieving specific milestones. But Atomic Habits suggested that success didn't come from obsessing over the end result. Instead, it came from developing systems that made those results inevitable. You realized that the reason you had been unsuccessful in the past was because you hadn't focused enough on the systems that would lead to your desired outcome. The 4 Laws of Behavior Change. Clear's book introduced a new framework for you to follow: the 4 Laws of Behavior Change. These laws, when followed, could help anyone build better habits and break bad ones. You were eager to apply them to your own life. Make it obvious. The first law was all about making the habit cue obvious. You realized that you often fell into old habits because the cues, triggers for action, were so ingrained in your environment. For example, you would snack on unhealthy foods out of habit whenever you sat down at your desk. Clear suggested that in order to build a new habit, the cue for that habit should be obvious. For you, that meant creating visual reminders. You started by setting out your workout clothes the night before, so you would see them first thing in the morning. This simple action made the habit cue visible and unavoidable. Make it attractive. The second law was to make the habit attractive. You understood that you couldn't rely on sheer willpower alone to form new habits. You needed to find ways to make the habits enjoyable. You had always disliked running, so you tried a different approach. Instead of forcing yourself to run, you made a habit of cycling, something you enjoyed much more. You also paired your new habit with something pleasurable: listening to a podcast or audiobook during exercise. This made the experience more enjoyable and turned it into something to look forward to, rather than something to endure. Make it easy. The third law was to make the habit easy. You realized that starting small was key. In the past, you had tried to jump into complex, intense routines right away, which led to burnout. Clear advised starting with small, easy-to-do habits that required minimal effort. For example, instead of committing to a 60-minute workout, you started by committing to just 10 minutes of exercise a day. This lower barrier to entry made it easier to stay consistent. Over time, as the habit became ingrained, you could gradually increase the intensity and duration, but the most important part was simply doing it every day, no matter how small the effort. Make it satisfying. The fourth law was about making the habit satisfying. You realized that one of the reasons you had struggled to form new habits was because you didn't feel a sense of reward. Clear explained that habits are more likely to stick if they provide immediate satisfaction or a positive feedback loop. You started celebrating small wins after each workout, whether it was acknowledging the effort you had put in or treating yourself to a healthy snack afterward. This sense of reward reinforced the habit, making it more likely you would continue the next day. The power of compound growth. As you applied these 4 laws to your daily life, you began to notice something incredible. The small changes started to compound. At first, the progress was imperceptible. You didn't notice a huge difference after one workout or a few days of healthy eating. But Clear's key insight was that tiny, incremental changes could lead to massive results over time. The power of atomic habits lay in the compound effect. The idea that small, consistent improvements, when practiced over time, build up into something much greater than the sum of their parts. By the end of the first month, you felt a difference. You had more energy, felt less stressed, and had even started to lose weight. These small victories kept you motivated to continue. Each tiny improvement was like depositing a small amount of money into an account, with the balance slowly growing over time. You realized that you didn't need to make drastic changes all at once. You just needed to stay consistent with the little things. Identity-based habits. One of the most profound insights in Atomic Habits came when Clear discussed the idea of identity-based habits. You had always focused on outcomes, I want to lose weight, or I want to get fit, but Clear suggested that a more powerful approach was to focus on the type of person you wanted to become. Instead of thinking, I want to run a marathon, you learned to ask, what does a marathon runner do? The answer was simple. A marathon runner runs regularly. By shifting your focus to identity, seeing yourself as a person who exercises regularly, you began to make decisions based on that identity. Instead of asking, should I work out today? You asked, what would a healthy, active person do? This subtle shift in mindset made it easier for you to stay committed to your habits because it was no longer about achieving a specific goal but about becoming the kind of person who naturally embodied those behaviors. Resilience and patience. As you continued on this journey, you learned the importance of resilience. In the past, if you missed a day of exercise or ate something unhealthy, you would have given up completely, thinking you had failed. But Atomic Habits taught you that failure was a part of the process. Instead of letting one misstep derail your progress, you learned to embrace mistakes as part of the learning process. You understood that the key to long-term success was not perfection but persistence. You also became more patient. You no longer expected immediate results. You trusted the process and believed that small improvements would eventually lead to big changes. The key was consistency, not perfection. The ripple effect. By the end of the year, you had transformed in ways you hadn't imagined. The small, atomic habits you had built, whether it was exercising daily, eating healthier, or reading more, had compounded into profound changes across every area of your life. You were not just healthier, you were more confident, more productive, and more resilient. Your relationships had improved, and you had a newfound sense of well-being. Your journey wasn't about big, dramatic changes or a sudden transformation. It was about consistently showing up and making small, sustainable changes that over time led to lasting success. You learned that success wasn't about willpower or motivation. It was about the power of small, atomic habits that compounded into extraordinary results. Through the lessons of Atomic Habits, you realized that true transformation didn't come from grand gestures, but from focusing on the tiny habits that, over time, create a life worth living.